"I'll triple any balance you have in the account," laughed the manager, not knowing the farmer had millions. Samuel Harrison walked into the central branch in Kansas City with a heavy heart and crumpled papers in his trembling hands. For 3 days, he had been trying to resolve a situation that could cost him the family ranch, but every attempt only met closed doors and looks of contempt. The 60-year-old man, wearing his faded red plaid shirt, jeans torn at the knees, and the leather hat he had inherited from his father, made his way to the main counter. The sound of his worn boots echoed across the bank's white marble floor, contrasting with the modern, gleaming surroundings. "Good morning, I need to open an urgent business account," said Samuel to the first employee he found. The blonde woman in the yellow blazer looked the farmer up and down and made a thinly veiled face of disgust. "Do you have the necessary documents?" she asked in an impatient tone. Samuel opened the worn leather briefcase he was carrying and pulled out a stack of papers. The employee picked them up with her fingertips as if they were contaminated. "I'll call the manager," she muttered, clearly annoyed. On the other side of the counter, 4 other employees began whispering among themselves. A brunette woman in a blue blazer discreetly pointed at Samuel and made a comment that drew muffled laughter. "Look at the type of people coming in here now," commented one of the employees, a man in a dark suit. "I bet he doesn't even have enough money to keep a checking account," replied a woman in a red blazer. Samuel pretended not to hear, but his hands trembled slightly. He knew his appearance didn't match the bank's sophisticated atmosphere, but the situation was too urgent to worry about formalities. When the manager appeared, things got worse. Victor Sterling was an elegant 45-year-old man with neatly combed grey hair and an impeccable suit. His blue eyes examined Samuel with evident disdain. "So you want to open a business account?" asked Victor with an ironic smile. "Yes, I need to transfer some money today. It's urgent," Samuel replied, trying to stay calm. Victor took the documents and flipped through them quickly, making doubtful expressions. "Blue Valley Ranch," he read aloud, "and what would be the initial deposit amount?" Samuel hesitated. He knew the answer might sound absurd coming from someone with his appearance. "A few million," he murmured. The silence that followed was broken by Victor's thunderous laughter. The employees around them stopped what they were doing to watch the scene. "A few million," repeated the manager, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Sir, are you sure you're in the right place?" "Yes, I am," Samuel replied, feeling his face grow hot with shame. "Look," said Victor, stepping closer with a malicious smile. "How about we make a bet? If you really do have all that money, I'll triple any balance you have in an account at our bank." The employees laughed even louder. A few people in line turned around to watch the spectacle. An elderly woman shook her head in disapproval of the situation. "I accept," Samuel replied, surprised by his own courage. "Excellent," Victor exclaimed, clapping his hands. "Let's check your financial situation then." The manager went over to the computer and typed in Samuel's information. The employees crowded behind him, eager to see the result. Samuel stood his ground, ignoring the curious looks from the other customers. "How strange," Victor muttered, frowning. "The system is giving an error." "An error?" asked Samuel. "Yes, it can't process your information, probably because you don't have sufficient funds in the account," Victor explained loudly, drawing more laughter. "That's not possible," Samuel protested. "Can I use my phone to show—" "Don't worry," Victor cut in. "The bank system is far more reliable than any app. If it's showing an error, it's because there's nothing to process." A younger employee, with brown hair and a navy blue blazer, approached discreetly. "Mr. Victor, can I try another terminal? Sometimes—" "That won't be necessary, Sarah," Victor cut her off. "The problem is obvious." Samuel felt his phone vibrate. It was a call from his daughter, Catherine. With a heavy heart, he answered, "Dad, where are you?" His daughter's voice was thick with tears. "The men from the lending bank are here at the ranch. They said if the payment doesn't arrive by 5 o'clock, we're going to lose everything." "Calm down, sweetheart. I'm taking care of it right now," Samuel replied, trying to sound confident. "Dad, they're putting chains on the gate. They say it's to make sure no one removes anything from the property." Samuel felt his chest tighten. 5 generations of the Harrison family had worked that land. Losing the ranch would be like losing his very identity. "Catherine, trust me, I'll handle it," he said before hanging up. Victor had overheard the entire conversation and smiled with satisfaction. "Family troubles?" he asked with feigned concern. "Well, now I understand the rush, but unfortunately I can't help someone who doesn't have the funds." "Please," Samuel pleaded, "let me show you my statements on my phone. You'll see that." "Sir," Victor interrupted, "I'm not going to waste any more time on this. If you want to open a simple savings account, I can help you, but $1 million business account, that's a conversation for somewhere else." At that moment, two people walked into the bank. Two elegant men in dark suits carrying leather briefcases. They stopped abruptly when they saw Samuel. "Mr. Harrison?" asked one of them, a bald man of about 50. "Dr. Howard!" Samuel exclaimed, relieved to see a familiar face. The two men approached and greeted Samuel respectfully. Victor watched the scene with growing curiosity. "What a coincidence running into you here," said Dr. Howard. "We're actually here to finalize the next contracts. The company is very pleased with the quality of your products." "Thank you, Doctor. But I'm having a few problems here," Samuel replied, glancing at Victor. Dr. Howard turned to the manager. "Excuse me, we're from United Organic Foods. Mr. Harrison is our main supplier. Is there a problem?" Victor turned slightly pale but tried to keep his composure. "No, there's no problem at all. Just checking some documents," he lied. "Good," Dr. Howard continued, "because we need to finalize the $25 million contract for next quarter. Mr. Harrison has the highest quality products in the state." The bank fell completely silent. Every employee stopped laughing. Victor swallowed hard. $25 million? He stammered. "Yes," confirmed the second executive, a red-haired man with glasses. "And that's just one of the contracts. Harrison Organics has partnerships with 3 more multinationals." Samuel noticed the change in behavior around him, but he wasn't fooled. The humiliation was still fresh. "Gentlemen, I appreciate the visit, but I need to resolve an urgent matter here. Can I speak with you both later?" "Of course, Mr. Harrison, whatever you need, we're at your disposal," said Dr. Howard, handing him a card and leaving with his colleague. Victor stood watching the executives leave, trying to process the information. Then he turned to Samuel with a forced smile. "Well, Mr. Harrison, how about we try checking your information in the system again?" "That won't be necessary," Samuel replied coldly. "You've already made it perfectly clear what you think of me." No, it was a misunderstanding," Victor insisted, visibly sweating. "Let's get this sorted out right now." "You bet you'd triple my balance," Samuel reminded him. "I hope you're ready to make good on that." Victor returned to the computer, this time typing more carefully. The employees approached again, but now with worried expressions instead of mockery. "How strange," Victor muttered. "It's still giving an error in the business system." The young employee, Sarah, approached again. "Mr. Victor, may I try? Yesterday we had similar problems, and we discovered it was a server failure on the business network." "Go ahead," Victor conceded, clearly nervous. Sarah began typing quickly, accessing different system screens. Samuel watched in silence, while the other employees whispered among themselves. "Here's the problem," Sarah announced. "The business server was offline for maintenance. I've managed to access it now." She entered Samuel's information again and waited for it to load. When the screen changed, Sarah fell silent, staring at the monitor. "Well?" Victor asked impatiently. Sarah turned slowly with a shocked expression. "Mr. Victor, you need to see this." Victor approached the computer and looked at the screen. His expression changed drastically, shifting from confidence to pure terror. This can't be right," he stammered. "What's going on?" Samuel asked. Victor swallowed hard and read in a low voice. "Business account number 1, Harrison AgriVentures. Balance, $4,230,000. The bank fell into absolute silence. The employees stopped all their activities. Customers in line exchanged surprised glances. "Go on," Samuel said calmly. Victor continued reading, his voice growing quieter. "Business account number 2, Harrison Organic Goods. Balance, $6,850,000. An employee let out an audible gasp. Victor was visibly sweating. "And the third account?" Samuel asked. "Business account number 3, Harrison Global Trade. Victor paused, took a deep breath, and continued. Balance $12,970,000. The total across the three accounts came to more than $23 million. The employees who had been laughing earlier now wore expressions of horror, realizing the magnitude of the mistake they had made. An elegant woman of about 70, who had observed the entire situation from the start, approached the counter. "Excuse me," she said with a firm voice. "I'm Eleanor Sterling, owner of this bank, and I'd very much like to know what's going on here." Victor went completely pale. It was his mother, Mrs. Eleanor, who rarely visited the branches, but when she did, it was to personally check on customer service. "Mother. I mean, Mrs. Sterling," Victor stammered. "I observed the entire situation," Mrs. Eleanor continued in a severe tone. "I saw a customer being publicly humiliated because of his appearance. I saw employees laughing and making prejudiced comments. Is this how my bank treats millionaire customers?" "It was a misunderstanding," Victor tried to explain. "Misunderstanding?" Mrs. Eleanor interrupted. "I heard you making bets with a customer's money. I saw you doubting his word and allowing your employees to ridicule him." Samuel watched the scene in silence. For the first time since he had walked into the bank, he felt that someone was defending his dignity. "Mr. Harrison," Mrs. Eleanor said, addressing him respectfully, "on behalf of Sterling Trust Bank, I offer my sincere apologies for the inappropriate treatment you received." "Thank you, ma'am," Samuel replied simply. "Now," Mrs. Eleanor continued, turning to Victor, "you bet you'd triple Mr. Harrison's balance. Which account does he choose for the bet?" Victor was in complete panic. If he tripled the 12 million account, he'd have to pay almost 26 million out of his own pocket. "Mother, please," he pleaded. "A bet is a bet," said Mrs. Eleanor inflexibly. "And you made it publicly, in front of all these customers." Samuel looked at Victor and then at Mrs. Eleanor. For a moment, he considered choosing the larger account and financially ruining the man who had humiliated him, but his conscience spoke louder. "Mrs. Sterling," said Samuel, "I choose my personal account, the smallest one." Sarah quickly accessed Samuel's personal account. The balance was only $2,400. "Tripled, that comes to $7,200, she calculated. Victor sighed in relief, but Mrs. Eleanor wasn't finished. "Sarah," she said, "process the transfer, and Victor, you're fired." "Mother," Victor protested. "I'm not your mother inside this bank. I'm the owner, and I don't tolerate employees who discriminate." At that moment, Samuel's phone rang again. It was Catherine, his daughter. "Dad, the men from the creditor bank said the deadline was moved up. They want the money within an hour, or they'll take the farm right now." Samuel's heart raced. It was only 2 in the afternoon, but the original deadline was 5 hours. "That can't be legal," he protested. "They said there's a clause in the contract that allows them to accelerate the due date in case of prior default." Samuel remembered that he had indeed been late on one installment 3 months earlier, when there was a problem with the delivery of a crop due to the rains. "Catherine, try to buy some time. I'm transferring the money right now." He turned to Mrs. Eleanor. "Ma'am, I need to transfer 8 million urgently. Can I do that now?" "Of course you can," she replied. "Sarah, process the transfer immediately." While Sarah prepared the transfer, 2 more people arrived at the bank, well-dressed lawyers carrying briefcases. "We're looking for Mr. Samuel Harrison," said one of them. "That's me," Samuel answered nervously. "We're from the firm Fletcher & Partners, representing Farmers State Bank, which holds the mortgage on your property. We've come to personally notify you about the accelerated maturity." "But my daughter said I had an hour," Samuel protested. "The deadline has been reduced to 30 minutes due to the mobilization of the team for foreclosure on the collateral," explained the lawyer coldly. Samuel felt the world spin. 30 minutes might not be enough time to process an international transfer. "Sarah, can you do it in 30 minutes?" he asked desperately. "A domestic transfer, yes, sir, but I don't know which bank you need to send it to." The lawyers exchanged glances, and one of them whispered something to the other. "Which bank is the transfer for?" asked Mrs. Eleanor. "Farmers State Bank," Samuel replied. Sarah stopped typing and looked at Mrs. Eleanor with a strange expression. "Mrs. Sterling, Farmers State Bank it's ours." Mrs. Eleanor finished with a sigh. We bought Farmers State Bank last month. The irony of the situation struck everyone present like lightning. Samuel was trying to transfer money from one bank to settle a debt with the very same bank. The man who had been humiliated for being poor was the creditor of $1 million debt with the very institution that had discriminated against him. This means that, Samuel began. It means you owe us $8 million, but you have $23 million deposited here, explained Mrs. Eleanor. The transfer is merely internal. The lawyers seemed embarrassed by the revelation. One of them addressed Mrs. Eleanor. Mrs. Sterling, we didn't know the debtor was a client of the bank. Now you do, she replied dryly, and you can inform the collections department that the debt is settled. Sarah quickly processed the settlement, and within minutes everything was resolved. Samuel called Catherine with the good news. Catherine, the farm is saved. The debt has been paid off. On the other end of the line, he heard his daughter crying with relief. Dad, thank you. I knew you could do it. When he hung up, Samuel turned to Mrs. Eleanor. Ma'am, I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me. You need to accept my apologies for the treatment you received. She then addressed the staff. Sarah, you are the new manager of this branch. You showed professionalism and respect for the customer. Thank you, Mrs. Sterling, Sarah replied, overcome with emotion. As for the rest of you, Mrs. Eleanor continued, looking at the other employees, you took part in humiliating a millionaire client. You will be transferred to other branches and will receive training on proper customer service. Victor, still in shock from being fired, gathered his personal belongings in a box and headed for the exit. As he passed Samuel, he stopped and said, I'm so sorry. I judge by appearances and I was completely wrong. I hope you learn from this, Samuel replied without bitterness. When Victor left, Mrs. Eleanor turned to Samuel again. Mr. Harrison, I'd like to offer you special terms for your accounts. Preferential interest rates, 0 fees on transfers, a personal banker. I accept, Samuel replied, but I have one condition. What is it? I want Sarah to be my personal banker. She was the only one who tried to help me from the very beginning. Perfect, Mrs. Eleanor agreed with a smile. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like, and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, in the days that followed, Samuel's life changed completely. Not in financial terms, since he had always been wealthy, but in terms of recognition and respect in the community. The story of how he was humiliated at the bank and then revealed to be a millionaire spread quickly throughout Kansas City. Catherine came to visit him at the farm the following weekend, bringing along her 3 grandchildren, 10-year-old Ben, 12-year-old Chloe, and 15-year-old Jack. Grandpa, is it true you're a millionaire? Ben asked as they rode horses around the property. What matters isn't having money, my grandson, Samuel replied. What matters is how we treat people and how they treat us. But why did you never say you were rich? Chloe asked. Because I wanted to be sure people like me for who I am, not for what I have, the grandfather explained patiently. Jack, the oldest, asked a more mature question. Grandpa, weren't you angry at those people at the bank? Samuel stopped his horse and looked at the horizon, thinking about his answer. I was very hurt, Jack, but anger doesn't solve anything. I'd rather use my experience to help other people who go through similar situations. And that was exactly what he was planning to do. During the week, Samuel had spoken with Sarah about creating a special program at the bank for small rural producers. Many farmers faced the same prejudice he had suffered, having difficulty obtaining credit because of their simple appearance. Mr. Harrison, Sarah said during a meeting at the bank, Mrs. Sterling has approved the project. We're going to create the Family Farm Initiative, specifically for rural producers. That's great, Sarah. And what about the Guarantee Fund? Also approved. You're depositing $2 million as collateral for loans of up to $100,000 for each small producer. It was a project Samuel had been dreaming about for years. He knew that many small farmers had good ideas and a willingness to work, but they faced difficulties at traditional banks. And what about the evaluation criteria? He asked. As you suggested, we're going to evaluate the project, not the appearance. Each candidate will present their business plan and will be evaluated by a technical team. Perfect. I want the first loan to go to Jesse Miller. Jesse Miller was a 25-year-old young man who had been working as a ranch hand on Samuel's ranch for 3 years. He dreamed of having his own dairy cattle operation, but had never been able to get credit to buy the land and the animals. "Does Jesse know yet?" asked Sarah. "Not yet. I want to make it a surprise." In fact, Samuel had much bigger plans for Jesse. During the 3 years they had worked together, he had observed the young man's dedication and intelligence. Jesse had innovative ideas about cattle management and environmental sustainability, but opportunities were lacking. That very day, Samuel went to find Jesse, who was tending to the calves in the corral. "Jesse, I need to talk to you." The young man, a tall, strong, dark-complexioned fellow, approached, wiping his hands on his shirt. "Something wrong, Mr. Samuel?" "Quite the opposite. I have a proposal for you." Samuel explained the bank's program and offered the loan so Jesse could start his own business. At first, the young man couldn't believe it. "Mr. Samuel, are you serious?" "Very serious, but there's a condition." "What?" "I want you to be my partner in creating a training center for rural youth." It was another project Samuel had been developing. He wanted to create a place where young people from the countryside could learn modern farming and ranching techniques, combining tradition with innovation. "I don't know what to say," Jesse stammered. "Say you accept. You have talent, Jesse. You just need an opportunity." At that moment, Jesse remembered his own experience trying to get credit from banks. He had been humiliated several times because of his humble origins and his lack of assets to offer as collateral. "I accept, Mr. Samuel. But why are you doing this for me?" "Because someone needs to break this cycle of prejudice. If I don't help those who have potential, who will?" 2 weeks later, the first event organized by Samuel took place at the ranch. He invited all the small producers in the region to a special lunch, where he would present the Family Farm Initiative. More than 50 families showed up. Samuel was moved to see the anticipation in their eyes. Many of those men and women had worked hard for decades, but had never had access to adequate credit. "Friends," Samuel began, standing on a small makeshift wooden platform in the ranch yard. "I know that many of you have been through difficult situations trying to get loans from banks." Murmurs of agreement spread through the crowd. "I know you've been judged by the clothes you wore, the way you spoke, the size of the property you had." "That's true," shouted a woman in the crowd. "They look at us like we're beggars." "Exactly," Samuel continued. "That's why, together with Sterling Trust Bank, we created a different program. A program that evaluates ideas, not appearances." He explained in detail how the program would work. Loans of up to $100,000, with subsidized interest rates, terms of up to 5 years to repay, and evaluation based exclusively on the viability of the proposed project. "And the best part," Samuel concluded, "is that I myself will be the guarantor for all the loans. I trust you as I trust myself." The silence that followed was broken by an enthusiastic round of applause. Several people had tears in their eyes. For the first time in their lives, someone was offering a real chance to get ahead. Frank Jenkins, a 50-year-old small-scale pig farmer, approached Samuel after the presentation. "Mr. Samuel, is this really true? You're not kidding." "It's true, Frank. What do you have in mind?" "I've always wanted to expand my livestock operation, build a small slaughterhouse to sell directly to butcher shops in the region. But I never managed to get the money for it." "How much do you need?" $80,000 to build the slaughterhouse and buy more breeding stock. "Prepare your project and present it at the bank next week. Sarah will guide you." Frank shook his head, still incredulous. "In 40 years working the land, no one ever gave me a chance like this." "You have one now," Samuel replied with a smile. While he talked with the producers, Samuel noticed a woman standing off to the side, watching everything with a thoughtful expression. It was Beverly Thompson, a 62-year-old woman who raised free-range chickens and sold eggs in town. Samuel approached her. "Mrs. Beverly, why didn't you come talk to me?" "Oh, Mr. Samuel, I'm too small for something like this. I only have 500 chickens." And what's your dream? Beverly hesitated, as if it were absurd to reveal such a thought. I've always wanted to have an automated poultry farm, the kind that produces 1,000 eggs a day, but I know it's impossible for someone like me. Why impossible? Well, I barely finished 4th grade. Who's going to give money to an old woman like me? Samuel felt his heart tighten. That sentence summed up decades of prejudice and social exclusion. Mrs. Beverly, how many years of experience do you have raising chickens? 45 years. And have you had problems with diseases, losses, things like that? Yes, but I always manage to solve them. I know chickens like no one else. Then you have 45 years of practical experience. That's worth more than any college degree. Beverly looked at Samuel in surprise. You really think so? I'm sure of it. Prepare a project for your automated poultry farm and present it at the bank. But I don't know how to put together a project. Sarah will help you. That's what she's there for. That night, after all the guests had left, Samuel sat on the porch of the house reflecting on the day. Catherine joined him, bringing 2 cups of coffee. Dad, you were emotional today during the conversations. I really was, sweetheart. Seeing hope being born in those people's eyes, it's priceless. And to think that 2 weeks ago you were being humiliated at the bank. It was good to have gone through that, Samuel said, surprising Catherine. What do you mean, Dad? It reminded me what it's like to be treated with disrespect. It had been a long time since I'd experienced that. It gave me even more motivation to help those in need. Catherine smiled, proud of her father. You've always been like this. I remember when I was a kid, you were always bringing people home to eat. Your mother used to complain, didn't she? Samuel laughed, remembering his wife who had passed away 5 years earlier. She complained, but deep down she liked it. She always said the house felt happier when there were people around. They stayed silent for a moment, listening to the sounds of the night in the countryside, crickets, owls, the distant lowing of cattle. Dad, can I ask you something? Of course. Why have you never flaunted your wealth? With all this money, you could have a very different life. Samuel thought before answering. Daughter, I grew up watching my father work 16 hours a day to build this farm, watching my mother get up at 4 in the morning to milk the cows. For me, money is a consequence of work, not the goal. And now, with all this recognition, now I have an even greater responsibility. The more you have, the more you owe to those who don't. The next day, Samuel went to the bank to oversee the first registrations for the program. He found a long line of interested producers, all in their simple work clothes, but carrying enormous dreams. Sarah was guiding each one on how to put together their projects. Samuel watched with satisfaction as she treated each person with respect and patience. How are things going, Sarah? Very well, Mr. Samuel. We already have 23 applications, quite varied projects, cattle raising, vegetable farming, fish farming, and the evaluation. Is it being fair? We're analyzing each case individually. Jesse Miller has already been approved. He'll receive $70,000 for his dairy operation. That's good. And Mrs. Beverly? She came back this morning with the poultry farm project. It's very well put together with help from her engineer son. She should be approved as well. Samuel was satisfied. The program was working exactly as he had planned, giving real opportunities to people who had the competence, but not the access. At that moment, an unexpected person arrived at the bank. Victor Sterling, the former manager who had humiliated him. He was wearing simpler clothes and carrying an old briefcase. Samuel and Victor stared at each other for a tense moment. Then Victor approached. Mr. Harrison, may I speak with you? Of course, Samuel replied, though he still felt the bitterness of the humiliation. I want to apologize again, and I want to tell you what I've learned in these past few weeks. I'm listening. After I was fired, I tried to find work at other banks. But my reputation preceded me. No one wants to hire someone who humiliated a millionaire client. Samuel didn't respond, just waited for him to continue. I ended up getting a job as a salesperson at a clothing store. I make 1/10 of what I used to make, Victor continued. But you know what I discovered. What? I discovered what it's like to be judged by appearance. Customers look at me and see an older man, somewhat desperate, selling clothes on commission. Some treat me badly, others don't even greet me. Samuel began to understand where Victor was going with this. Now I know how you felt that day, Victor concluded with a choked voice. And why are you telling me this? Because I want to ask for a chance, not a job. I know I don't deserve that, but a chance to be part of your project in some way. Samuel was surprised by the request. What do you mean? I can work as a volunteer, helping the producers put together their projects. I have experience in financial analysis. I know what banks look for. It was an unexpected proposal. Samuel looked at Victor, trying to identify his true intentions. Why would you do that? Because I need to redeem myself. I want to prove to myself that I can be a better person. Samuel reflected for a moment. There was something sincere in Victor's tone, a humility that hadn't existed before. All right, he said finally. You can help, but with one condition. What? You'll work directly with the humblest people, those who have the most difficulty putting together their projects. I accept. And Victor. Yes? If I realize you're doing this just to improve your image, you're out. I understand. You won't regret giving me this chance. 2 weeks later, Samuel visited the workshop that Victor had set up in the town's parish house to help the producers. He was surprised by what he found. Victor was sitting at a simple wooden table, helping an elderly couple calculate the viability of their small strawberry plantation. His manners were completely different, patient, respectful, instructive. Mr. Frank, Victor was explaining to the producer, by your numbers, you can produce 2,000 kilos of strawberries per harvest. If you sell at $15 a kilo, you have a revenue of $30,000. And the profit? Asked the elderly man. After deducting the costs you gave me, $18,000 remain. With 3 harvests a year, that's $54,000 in annual profit. Mr. Frank's wife, Mrs. Martha, smiled with relief. That's enough to pay off the loan and still have a little money left over. Exactly, Victor confirmed. You have a viable business. Samuel watched the entire conversation hidden behind the door. After the couple left, he approached Victor. How are things going here? Very well, Mr. Harrison. I've already helped 15 families put together their projects. And how are you feeling? Victor stopped organizing the papers and looked at Samuel. Different. Very different. How so? Before at the bank, I saw clients as numbers. How much they had, how much they could deposit, what the profit would be for the bank. Now I see people with dreams, families who depend on those projects. And does that change anything? It changes everything. When you learn Mrs. Martha's story, someone who's worked with strawberries since she was 15 to support 5 children, you can't be indifferent anymore. Samuel could see that the change in Victor was genuine. The humility wasn't an act. It was the result of a real transformation. Victor, I have a proposal for you. What is it? I want you to be the program's technical coordinator, with a salary and everything. Victor was silent for a long moment. Mr. Harrison, I don't know if I deserve it. No one deserves a second chance, Victor. It's given out of compassion, not merit. Why are you doing this for me? Because I saw that you truly changed, and because the program needs someone with your technical experience. I accept, Victor said, his voice choked with emotion. But I also want to keep serving the humbler folks. Of course, that's an important part of the work. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, moving on. 6 months later, the Family Farm Initiative had already approved more than 80 loans. Success stories were starting to appear all over the region. Jesse Miller, Samuel's former ranch hand, had built one of the most modern dairy operations in the area. His results were so good that other farms began copying his management techniques. Mrs. Beverly expanded her poultry operation from 500 to 2,000 hens and now supplied eggs to 3 supermarkets in the city. Her income had tripled, allowing her to renovate her house and buy a used car. Frank Jenkins built his small slaughterhouse and now processed not only his own pigs, but also those of other small farmers. He created 10 direct jobs in the region. But the story that moved Samuel the most was that of a family that wasn't part of the original program. Brian and Janet were a young couple. He was 28, she was 25. They had 2 small children and lived in a modest little house on the outskirts of Kansas City. Brian worked as a bricklayer and Janet as a housekeeper. They showed up at the bank on a rainy Thursday, soaking wet and nervous. Janet was carrying documents inside a plastic bag, wrapped in another bag to keep them from getting wet. "We'd like to talk about Mr. Harrison's program," Brian said timidly to Sarah. "Are you farmers?" Sarah asked. "Not exactly," Janet replied, "but we have an idea." They explained that they lived in an area with many struggling families who had small backyards going unused. The idea was to create a community garden project where each family would tend a plot and then share the harvest. "That's interesting," Sarah said, "but the program is specifically for rural activity." But this is rural activity," Brian protested, "just urban." Sarah was uncertain and decided to consult Samuel. When he heard the proposal, he smiled right away. "Of course it can work. Urban agriculture is agriculture too." "But they don't own any land," Sarah reminded him. "We'll find them land," Samuel decided. The next day, Samuel went to meet Brian and Janet in person. They lived in a neighborhood called Hope Meadows, an area of simple houses where most families had very low incomes. "It's here," said Brian, pointing to an empty lot of about 2,000 square meters in the center of the neighborhood. "Whose lot is this?" asked Samuel. "The city's. It's been abandoned for years." Samuel looked around and saw the potential. The lot was flat, had access to water, and got sun all day long. "How many families would be interested?" he asked. "About 20, replied Janet. "We've already talked to the neighbors." "And do you think you could organize the work?" "We're sure of it," said Brian with conviction. "A lot of people here are unemployed, and they have the time and the will." Samuel was impressed by the couple's enthusiasm. He decided to support the project, but first he needed to sort out the land issue. The next day, he went to City Hall to talk to the mayor, Michael Stevenson, a 50-year-old man he'd known for decades. "Samuel, what a pleasure to see you," greeted Michael. "I heard about what happened at the bank. How are you doing?" "I'm well, Michael. I'm here to talk about an interesting project." Samuel explained the idea of the community gardens and asked about the possibility of granting the lot. "In principle, I don't see a problem," replied Michael, "but I need to check with the legal department about the formalities." "It's urgent, Michael. The families are eager to get started. I'll have an answer for you in a week." When Samuel returned to the neighborhood to share the news, he found a surprise. Brian and Janet had organized a meeting with all the interested families, and there were more than 30 people waiting. "Mr. Samuel," shouted a child as he arrived. The families gathered around, eager to hear about the project. Samuel explained that he had spoken with the mayor and that they would have an answer about the lot soon. "And what if the answer is no?" asked a worried older woman. "Then we'll find another lot," replied Samuel simply. "What do you mean?" asked Brian. "I own some properties in the region. I can set aside part of one for the project." The people's enthusiasm was contagious. They started making plans about how to divide the lot, which crops to plant, how to organize the work. A week later, Michael called Samuel with good news. "Samuel, the lot is approved. I can sign the grant today." "Great. I'll pick up Brian and Janet so we can sign together." "Actually," continued Michael, "I was so impressed with the project that I want to expand it. We have other vacant lots in the city that could be used the same way." It was an exciting prospect. Samuel envisioned the possibility of creating a network of community gardens throughout the entire city. When he gave the news to the families, the celebration was moving. Some people cried tears of joy. Others immediately started planning what they would plant. "When can we start?" asked Janet anxiously. "Tomorrow," replied Samuel. And so it was. The next day, more than 20 families gathered at the lot to begin the work. Samuel provided tools, seeds, and fertilizer. Within 2 weeks, the empty lot had become an organized, productive garden. 3 months later, The first harvest exceeded all expectations. They produced more than 500 pounds of vegetables and greens. Each family took its share, and the surplus was sold at an improvised market stand. "Mr. Samuel," said Brian one Saturday afternoon, "I don't know how to thank you." "No need to thank me, Brian. You all did the work. But without your help, none of this would have been possible. And without your dedication, my help wouldn't have been worth anything." Janet approached carrying a basket with produce from the garden. "Take this home, Mr. Samuel. It's from the first harvest." Samuel accepted the basket, deeply moved. It was more than vegetables and greens. It was a symbol that ordinary people could transform their lives when given an opportunity. That night, Samuel prepared a special salad using produce from the community garden. Catherine was having dinner with him and was impressed by the flavor. "Dad, this lettuce is delicious. It's from the Hope Meadows garden." "So now what? What's the next project?" Samuel smiled mysteriously. "I have an idea that could change a lot of things." "What is it?" "An agricultural training center for low-income youth." It was an old dream of Samuel's. He wanted to create a place where young people aged 15 to 25 could learn modern agricultural techniques, have contact with rural technology, and prepare to become the region's new producers. "Where would it be?" "At the ranch. I have 200 hectares I don't use. I can turn them into a training area." "That's a wonderful idea, Dad. I want young people to learn not just techniques, but also management, sustainability, cooperativism." "And how would the selection process work?" "There wouldn't be a selection process," Samuel replied, surprising Catherine. "Any interested young person could participate, even without experience. Especially without experience. The idea is to give an opportunity to those who never had one." Catherine was thoughtful for a moment. "Dad, can I help with the project?" "Of course, how?" "I can handle the administrative side. I have experience in project management." "That would be great, sweetheart." The following week, father and daughter began putting together the training center project. They decided to call it the Harrison Rural Leadership Institute. The project included 6-month courses, with theoretical classes in the morning and practical ones in the afternoon. The young people would learn about different agricultural crops, animal husbandry, use of technology, financial management, and cooperativism. "What about lodging?" Catherine asked. "We'll build a simple but comfortable dormitory. The young people will stay at the ranch for the entire course period." "And meals?" "Also included. We'll use products from the ranch itself and from the community gardens." The first step was obtaining the necessary licenses. Samuel hired a specialized company to handle all the paperwork. Meanwhile, he began spreading the word about the project informally. The response was surprising. Within 2 weeks, more than 100 young people had shown interest. "How are we going to select them?" Catherine asked, worried. "We're not going to select, we're going to expand." "Dad, if there are 100 interested young people, we'll accept 100, but that will cost a fortune." "Sweetheart, what's the point of having money if you don't use it to change lives?" Catherine shook her head, but smiled. She knew her father well enough to know that when he decided to help someone, no argument could sway him. The Institute's project grew quickly. Samuel hired agricultural engineers to develop the curriculum, architects to design the facilities, and educators to develop the teaching methodology. Jesse Miller, his former employee, offered to be the practical dairy farming instructor. Victor Sterling would be responsible for financial management and cooperativism. "I want young people to learn not just how to produce, but also how to sell, how to organize themselves into cooperatives, how to plan investments," Samuel explained during a planning meeting. "And what about environmental sustainability?" one of the hired agronomists asked. "Essential. I want them to understand that it's possible to produce a lot without degrading the environment." Construction of the facilities began 3 months after the projects were approved. Samuel preferentially hired workers from the region, generating local employment and income. While the work was underway, he continued visiting the community gardens and following up on the projects financed by the bank. One afternoon, he received an unexpected call. It was Dr. Howard from United Organic Foods. "Mr. Harrison, we have an interesting proposal." "What is it, Doctor?" "Our company wants to sponsor your institute." We're impressed with the results of your social projects. Sponsor how? We can provide equipment, seeds, certified organic inputs. In return, your graduates would have priority to supply our company. It was a tempting proposal. It meant financial sustainability for the institute and guaranteed market access for future graduates. I accept, Samuel decided, but with one condition. What? The young people can't be obligated to sell only to you. They must have the freedom to choose their clients. Of course, we want a partnership, not exclusivity. The deal was closed in 2 weeks. The company would provide $200,000 annually in equipment and inputs, plus guarantee purchasing at least 70% of the graduates' production for the first 2 years. With the institute nearly ready, Samuel decided to hold the selection process for the first students. He organized meetings in the most underserved neighborhoods of the region to spread the word about the opportunities. The first meeting was held at Hope Meadows itself, where the community garden operated. Over 50 young people showed up. The institute offers complete training in modern agriculture, Samuel explained. 6 months of intensive coursework, with housing, meals, and study materials all free. And then? Asked a 19-year-old young man. Then you'll be prepared to run your own properties, work at rural businesses, or form cooperatives. But we don't have land, protested a young woman. The bank program can finance land purchases, or you can form cooperatives and work together. It was exactly what Samuel had hoped for, motivated young people, but without opportunities. The institute would be the bridge between their potential and the possibilities of the market. How many openings are there? Asked another young person. Initially 40. But if there are more qualified applicants, we expand. And what are the criteria? Between 15 and 25 years old, completed elementary education, and a strong desire to learn. That's it? That's it. The simplicity of the criteria surprised the young people. They were used to complex, exclusionary selection processes. By the end of the meeting, 37 young people had signed up. Samuel was satisfied. It was an ideal number for the first class. The meetings were repeated in other neighborhoods. Within 2 weeks, there were over 200 applicants. Samuel decided to start with 4 simultaneous cohorts, 1 each quarter. The Harrison Rural Leadership Institute was inaugurated on a sunny September morning. Samuel insisted on a simple ceremony with the families of the selected young people in attendance. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter in your lives, he told the 40 students of the first cohort. You're receiving an opportunity, but your success depends on you. The young people were visibly moved. Many had never left home, never had access to quality professional education. I want you to always remember, Samuel continued, that you're not here out of charity. You're here because you have the potential to become the new leaders of American agriculture. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out as we're just getting started. Now, back to the story. The first day of classes was memorable. The young people toured the facilities, modern classrooms, a soil laboratory, experimental greenhouses, demonstration barns, and cultivation areas. Tyler was one of the students, a 20-year-old young man who had dropped out of school to work as a bricklayer's helper and support his family. When he heard about the institute, he saw a chance to change his life. I never imagined I'd study at a place like this, he remarked to Abigail, an 18-year-old young woman who lived in a rural area and dreamed of modernizing her family's small property. Me neither, Abigail replied. My parents thought I was making it up when I told them about the institute. Jesse Miller was the first instructor to address the class. You're going to learn techniques that many millionaire farmers don't even know. You'll learn how to produce more while spending less, how to care for the land without degrading it, how to use technology to boost production. And does it really work? Asked Tyler. It really does. I was a ranch hand for Mr. Samuel 2 years ago. Today I own my own property and produce 30% more milk per cow than the regional average. Jesse's credibility was essential. The young people saw in him a concrete example that it was possible to go from being an employee to becoming a landowner. The practical classes began in the second week. The students learned to analyze soil, calculate fertilizer application, identify pests and diseases, handle animals, and operate modern equipment. Abigail stood out in the horticulture classes. She had a natural gift for identifying problems in plants and proposing creative solutions. "You have a special talent for this," praised the horticulture instructor. "I grew up helping my mother in the garden," explained Abigail, "but I never knew it had a scientific basis." "It does. Your practical experience is valuable. Now you'll understand the theory behind what you were already doing instinctively." Tyler, for his part, was drawn to the management side. He had a knack for numbers and logical reasoning, and quickly grasped concepts like costs, revenue, and profitability. "I could help my family better organize our small livestock operation," he commented to Victor Sterling during a lesson on financial planning. "Of course you can. And later, you can teach other small producers in your region." That was one of the Institute's goals, to train not just producers, but multipliers of knowledge. Each graduate would be an agent of change in their community. In the third month of the course, the students began developing individual projects. Each one had to choose a rural activity and put together a complete business plan. Tyler chose to develop a free-range poultry project. He wanted to produce organic chicken and eggs to sell directly to consumers. "It's a growing market," he explained to his advisor. "People are placing more value on natural products without hormones or antibiotics. And do you have any idea how to market it?" "I was thinking of selling at the farmer's market, maybe doing home deliveries." "Good idea. What about creating your own brand?" Tyler hadn't thought of that. The idea of having his own brand seemed far too sophisticated for someone of his background. "You think I could do it?" "Of course. I'll help you develop the visual identity, register the brand, and create promotional materials." It was exactly this kind of guidance that set the Institute apart from other courses. The students learned not only production techniques, but also how to position themselves professionally in the market. Abigail developed an organic horticulture project focused on medicinal plants. She wanted to combine food production with growing herbs for therapeutic use. "It's an innovative project," assessed her advisor. "Medicinal plants have a guaranteed market, and you can add value by selling processed products." "What do you mean?" "Ready-made teas, essential oils, natural ointments. The added value can be 10 times higher than selling just the raw plant." Abigail was excited by the possibilities. She began researching the processing of medicinal plants and discovered a world of opportunities. In the 5th month of the course, something happened that left a deep impression on all the students. Samuel called them to a special meeting and made a surprising announcement. "Do you remember the story of how I was treated at the bank a year ago?" They all remembered. The story had become legendary in the region. "That humiliation taught me something important. There's no point in having money if you don't use it to change lives. So I want to make an offer to you all." The young people waited anxiously. "Everyone who graduates from the Institute will be entitled to special financing. $50,000 to start your own business, with interest of only 2% per year and a 10-year term to pay it back." There was total silence for a few seconds. Then applause and shouts of joy echoed through the auditorium. Tyler felt tears in his eyes. $50,000 was more money than his family had ever seen together in their whole lives. "But there's a condition," Samuel continued, as the noise died down. "What?" several young people asked at once. "Each of you must commit to helping at least 5 other people from your community, teaching techniques, providing guidance, opening opportunities." "What do you mean?" Abigail asked. "You, Abigail, who will work with medicinal plants, can teach other women in your region to grow and process herbs. Tyler, who will raise pasture-raised chicken, can mentor other young people interested in poultry farming." It was the concept of multiplying knowledge. Each graduate would become a small center of technology and opportunity, radiating out into their region. "I accept," Tyler shouted immediately. "Me too," said Abigail. One by one, all 40 students in the first class accepted the commitment. The graduation took place 3 weeks later, at a moving ceremony. The young people's families attended, many of them watching a child graduate for the first time in their lives. Samuel gave the keynote speech. "You aren't just graduating in agricultural techniques. You're graduating as agents of social transformation. Each of you now has the power and the responsibility to change the reality of your community. After the ceremony, there was a celebratory lunch. Samuel moved among the young people and their families, talking with each one about their future plans. "Mr. Samuel," Tyler's mother said, "I don't know how to thank you for what you've done for my son." "No need to thank me, Mrs. Dorothy. Tyler earned his place here through his own effort. But without your opportunity, and without his dedication, the opportunity wouldn't have meant anything." It was a conversation Samuel had with dozens of families that day. They all expressed gratitude, but he always directed the credit back to the young people themselves. In the following months, the results began to show. Tyler set up his pasture-raised chicken operation, and within 6 months he had regular customers at 3 supermarkets in the region. His brand Pasture Gold Poultry became synonymous with quality. Abigail launched her medicinal plants project and developed a line of organic teas sold in natural pharmacies across 5 cities. Her monthly revenue exceeded her most optimistic expectations. More important than individual success, the young people were keeping their commitment to multiply knowledge. Tyler organized a group of 15 young people from his region interested in poultry farming. Abigail created a women's cooperative for producing medicinal plants with 12 participants. The institute's second class had 80 students, the third, 120. The success of the first graduates attracted more and more interested people. Samuel had to expand the facilities twice in the first year. He built new dormitories, more classrooms, and expanded the experimental production areas. A year after the first graduation, he received an unexpected visit. It was the State Secretary of Agriculture, Dr. David Patterson, accompanied by a technical team. "Mr. Harrison, I came to see the Institute in person. The results we're seeing are impressive." "Thank you, Doctor, but the credit goes to the young people and the teachers." "Don't be modest. Your initiative is transforming family farming in the region." Dr. Patterson explained that the state wanted to create a partnership with the Institute, offering resources to expand the project to other regions. "We're proposing a $5 million agreement to replicate the model in 10 municipalities," he explained. It was an opportunity for far greater impact than Samuel had ever dreamed of, but he had concerns. "Doctor, my condition is that we maintain pedagogical autonomy. I don't want political interference in the project." "Of course, you would keep full autonomy. The state would only contribute financial resources and logistical support. And the selection criteria? The same ones you use, low-income youth, with no exclusionary selection process." Samuel accepted the partnership. It was the chance to multiply the project's impact tenfold. Over the next 2 years, similar institutes were created in 10 municipalities across the Chicago region, each one adapted to local realities, but maintaining the same principles: quality, free education, a focus on low-income youth, and a commitment to multiplying knowledge. The results exceeded expectations. In 3 years, more than 2,000 young people were trained. Of those, 85% started their own agricultural businesses, generating more than 3,000 indirect jobs. Samuel's story gained national attention. He was invited to give talks, received social responsibility awards, and became a leading figure in rural inclusion projects. But what made him most proud were the individual stories. Like Carla's, a 19-year-old who created a cooperative of women making homemade sweets that now exports to 3 countries. Or Michael's, who developed an innovative fish farming system in small tanks and taught the technique to more than 100 riverside families. Or Ashley's, who specialized in organic production and today provides technical consulting to 50 small producers in their transition to sustainable agriculture. Each story confirmed Samuel's thesis: that opportunity and education can transform lives and entire communities. 3 years after the incident at the bank, Samuel was invited to a special ceremony. Sterling Trust Bank was opening a new branch completely dedicated to family farming. "Mr. Harrison," said Mrs. Eleanor during the ceremony, "this branch exists thanks to you. Your projects taught us to see potential where we once saw only difficulties." The new branch had specific protocols for serving small producers, staff trained in family farming, a welcoming environment, and financial products designed for rural needs. Sarah was named regional manager of family farming, overseeing 5 specialized branches. Her success leading the Family Farm Initiative made her a nationally recognized leader in rural banking inclusion. "Mr. Harrison," said Sarah during the ceremony, "it all started when you were humiliated at that bank. Who could have imagined that such a terrible situation would bring about so many positive changes?" "The best things in life sometimes come from the hardest moments," Samuel replied philosophically. Victor Sterling was also present at the ceremony. He had become the national coordinator of the bank's rural inclusion program, traveling across the country to implement similar projects in other regions. "Mr. Harrison," said Victor, approaching Samuel, "not a day goes by that I don't remember the lesson you taught me." "What lesson?" "That humility has nothing to do with a bank account. It has to do with character." "And you learned the lesson well," Samuel replied. "Today you help hundreds of families achieve their dreams. That's why I'm grateful for the second chance you gave me." That night after the ceremony, Samuel had dinner at home with Catherine and his 3 grandchildren. The conversation inevitably turned to social projects. "Grandpa," asked Ben, now 13, "don't you get tired of helping so many people?" "Quite the opposite, my grandson. Helping others gives me energy." "But you spend so much money on this," commented Chloe, 15 years old. "Sweetheart, money kept in the bank is good for nothing. Money invested in people is worth more than any financial application." "What do you mean?" asked Jack, 18 years old. "When you invest in a person, they transform their own life and the lives of others. The return is exponential." Jack was finishing high school and starting to think about the future. The conversation sparked his interest. "Grandpa, can I be part of your projects?" "Of course. What kind of involvement do you have in mind?" "I want to study agronomy and then work at the institute." Samuel felt moved. Seeing his grandson interested in carrying on the social work was one of the greatest joys of his life. "Jack, you would be very welcome, but I want you to do it out of your own conviction, not family pressure." "It is out of conviction, Grandpa. I want to help young people like me have opportunities." At that moment, Samuel felt his legacy was secure, not just financially, but in terms of values and purpose. 6 months later, a letter arrived at the institute that deeply moved Samuel. It was from Tyler, the first student to graduate, written 3 years after his graduation. "Mr. Samuel, I am writing this letter to tell you how my life is going. My poultry farm has grown a lot. I now have 15 employees, and we supply 23 supermarkets in the region, but that is not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the 5 people I committed to helping. In fact, I have already helped 17 young people start their own free-range chicken farms. 3 of them already have their own employees. We started a cooperative called Valley Growers Cooperative with 26 producers. We negotiate better prices, buy supplies together, and share knowledge. My wife, whom I met at the institute, she was from the 2nd class, also fulfilled her commitment. She taught 12 women how to process medicinal plants, and today we have the first private label brand of natural medicines in our region. I know you always say we don't need to thank you, that we earned it. But I want you to know that your generosity changed not only our lives, but the lives of hundreds of families. My children, when they grow up, will know the story of the man who believed in poor young people when no one else did. Thank you for everything. Tyler Thompson, graduate of the 1st class of the Harrison Rural Leadership Institute. After reading the letter, Samuel remained silent for a long time. Catherine, who was present, noticed her father's eyes shining with emotion. "Dad, are you okay?" "I'm great, sweetheart. I'm just thinking about how interesting life is." "What do you mean?" 4 years ago, I was humiliated at a bank for looking poor. Today, that humiliation turned into the greatest source of joy in my life. Suffering teaches us things that abundance never would, Catherine agreed. Exactly. If I hadn't gone through that experience, maybe I never would have developed so much empathy for the excluded. They talked late into the night about future plans. Samuel wanted to expand the projects even further, creating a research center for family farming and a permanent rural microcredit fund. Dad, with all these projects, how much of the original fortune is left? Samuel smiled. Less than half. But you know what's interesting? What? The more I give, the more it seems I have. The original businesses are doing better than ever, and new opportunities keep appearing. That's true. United Organic Foods has increased its contracts by 300% in the last 3 years. And do you know why? Because now they have access to hundreds of well-trained small farmers organized into cooperatives. Everyone wins. It was the virtuous cycle Samuel had always imagined. Investing in people generated more business, which generated more resources to invest in more people. 4 years after the bank incident, Samuel received the invitation that would crown all his social work. The University of Chicago wanted to grant him the title of Doctor Honoris Causa in agricultural sciences. "Dad, what an honor!" Catherine exclaimed when she heard the news. "It is an honor indeed, daughter. But what moves me the most is the reason. Which is, it's not because of my business or my wealth. It's because of the social impact of the projects." The ceremony took place on an October morning in the auditorium of the Louise de Queiroz College of Agriculture. Hundreds of graduates from the institutes, professors, authorities, and family members were present. In the conferral speech, the university president said, "We confer this title upon Mr. Samuel Harrison not only for his contribution to American agribusiness, but mainly for his dedication to democratizing agricultural knowledge, transforming excluded young people into protagonists of their own stories." When it was his turn to speak, Samuel stepped up to the podium, visibly moved. "I accept this title on behalf of all the young people who believed it was possible to change their lives through education and dignified work." He paused, looked at the audience, and continued. 5 years ago, I was publicly humiliated at a bank for looking poor. That painful experience taught me that social prejudice is one of the greatest injustices of our time." Murmurs of indignation spread through the auditorium. The story was well known, but hearing it directly from Samuel still had an impact. "But I also learned that we can turn pain into purpose, humiliation into motivation to help others. If I am here today receiving this title, it is because hundreds of young people gave me the opportunity to turn financial resources into social transformation." The applause was long and warm. In the front row, Victor Sterling applauded with tears in his eyes. Sarah smiled proudly. Mrs. Eleanor nodded approvingly at every word. "That is why," Samuel concluded, "I dedicate this title to all those who still face prejudice because of their appearance, origin, or social condition. You have infinite potential. You just need an opportunity to shine." After the ceremony, there was a reception where Samuel talked with dozens of alumni. Each one had a story of overcoming adversity to tell, but they all made a point of emphasizing that they were fulfilling the commitment to multiply opportunities in their communities. "Professor Samuel," said a young woman he did not recognize at first. "Just call me Samuel," he corrected with a smile. "I'm Mariana, from the 5th class of the Topeka Institute." "Mariana, great to see you. How are things?" "Very well. I set up a fruit processing agribusiness. We already have 12 employees and we supply 3 supermarket chains." "Congratulations. And the social commitment, I'm fulfilling it too. I organized a group of 23 women fruit growers. I buy their production at 20% above market price, and I also provide free technical assistance." "Excellent. And how are they responding?" "Their farms have become the most productive in the region. Some have already bought more land, others are expanding into other crops." It was exactly the result Samuel expected. Alumni becoming agents of social transformation, creating community development networks. At night, at home, Samuel reflected on the journey of the last few years, from a victim of prejudice to an honorary doctor for social contributions. The irony was not lost on him. Catherine joined him on the porch for the traditional evening coffee. "Dad, did you ever imagine you would get this far?" "Never, daughter. My dreams were always much simpler." "And now? What are the next dreams?" Samuel smiled thoughtfully. "I want to see the institutes running on their own, without depending on my presence. I want to see the alumni creating their own social projects. I want to see American family farming transformed by a generation of well-prepared young people. Those are big dreams, but achievable. We're already seeing it happen. It was true. The institutes already had administrative and pedagogical autonomy. Many alumni were creating similar projects in their regions. The transformation movement had taken on a life of its own. And you, Catherine, what are your dreams? I want to expand the research side. We have the means to develop specific technologies for family farming, adapted seeds, low-cost techniques, sustainable irrigation systems. Great idea. We can create an applied research center. Father and daughter spent the rest of the night planning new projects. The family tradition of turning resources into opportunities for others was being passed down to the new generation. 5 years after the bank incident, Samuel was approached by a filmmaker interested in telling his story. The film would be called The Humiliation That Became Hope. Mr. Samuel, the director said, your story needs to be known throughout the United States. It's an example of how to transform adversity into strength for good. I'll only accept if part of the film's proceeds go to the institutes, Samuel negotiated. Of course. Actually, we wanted to propose exactly that. The film was released 2 years later and became a national phenomenon, not only because of the inspiring story, but because it showed concrete results of well-executed social projects. The impact brought new partners and resources to the institutes. Companies from all over the country wanted to support the initiative. Universities offered research partnerships. State governments asked for consulting to replicate the model. But what made Samuel most proud was discovering that the film had inspired hundreds of people to start their own social projects. Business people, doctors, lawyers, teachers, people from all fields began using their resources and knowledge to transform underserved communities. On a Sunday afternoon, 7 years after the humiliation at the bank, Samuel was on the porch of his house when he saw an unfamiliar car coming up the farm road. An elegant man, around 40 years old, got out, accompanied by a woman and 2 small children. "Mr. Samuel?" the man asked as he approached. "Yes, that's me. How can I help you?" "My name is Paulo Sterling. I am Victor Sterling's son." Samuel was surprised. Victor had remarried and had 2 children after rebuilding his life. "Paulo, your father told me a lot about you. What a pleasure to meet you." "Actually," Paulo continued, "I came here to make a request." "What is it?" "I want to work at the Institute. I want to be part of your social projects. But you don't have agricultural experience." "I don't. I have a degree in business administration and I work at a multinational. But I want to change careers. I want to dedicate my life to projects that transform people." Paulo explained that he had grown up listening to his father's stories about the transformation Samuel had brought about in his life. Since childhood, he had dreamed of being part of that work. "My father always said that you not only gave him a second chance, but you taught him the true meaning of life. Your father learned on his own. I just offered an opportunity. That's exactly what I want, the opportunity to learn from you and dedicate my career to transforming lives." Samuel was moved by the request. Seeing Victor's son wanting to follow the path of social responsibility was confirmation that the values were being passed down from generation to generation. "Paulo, it would be an honor to have you on the team. When can you start?" "Tomorrow." "Hold on," Samuel laughed. "First you need to get to know all the projects well, understand our philosophy, and see if this is really what you want for your life." "I already know that, Mr. Harrison. I've visited other social projects. I've studied international models. What you do here is unique in the world." Paulo had done his homework. He brought a complete dossier on similar initiatives in other countries and a detailed analysis of the international expansion potential of American institutes. "My proposal is to create an international foundation to bring the American model to developing countries in Africa and Latin America," Paulo explained. It was an ambitious and fascinating idea. Samuel had never thought about expanding internationally, but the proposal made sense. "It's possible, Paulo, but we have to be sure the model adapts to other realities. That's why I want to work here first. Learn hands-on, understand every detail, and then adapt it to other cultures." Samuel accepted Paulo onto the team. He would start as an administrative assistant, go through every department, and if he showed aptitude, he would take on expansion projects. 3 years later, Paulo was leading the first international project, a rural training institute in Senegal, Africa, adapted to local conditions but maintaining the fundamental principles of the American model. "How are things going over there?" Samuel asked during a video conference. "Fantastic. Young Senegalese people have the same hunger for opportunity as Americans. The first class has already graduated and is setting up their cooperatives." "And local acceptance?" "Total. The Senegalese government wants to expand to other regions, and we already have interested parties in Kenya and Mozambique." It was rewarding to see the project gaining international dimensions. Samuel never imagined that his experience of humiliation at a bank in rural Kansas would generate social transformation in Africa. 10 years after the original episode, Samuel turned 70. The family organized a surprise party at the ranch, inviting hundreds of people who had been impacted by his projects. Present were former students from the institutes, growers benefited by the credit programs, families from the community gardens, bank employees, teachers, officials, and, of course, the entire Harrison family. "Grandpa," said Jack, now graduated in agronomy and working as the educational coordinator at the main institute, "we prepared a surprise for you." "What surprise?" "A video with testimonials from people whose lives were transformed by your projects." The video lasted 40 minutes. There were hundreds of emotional testimonials from young people who had risen out of poverty, families that had prospered, communities that had developed. Each story was unique, but they all had one common denominator: opportunity offered at the right moment. When it ended, Samuel was visibly moved. "Thank you for this wonderful gift, but I want you to know that I see myself as merely an instrument. You are the true protagonists of these transformations." Catherine spoke up. "Dad, in these 10 years, you've invested over $15 million in social projects. You've directly helped more than 5,000 young people. Indirectly, you've impacted more than 20,000 families. You've created nearly 40,000 jobs, and it all started with humiliation at a bank." It was impressive to think about the journey, from victim of prejudice to agent of massive social transformation. "And it doesn't stop there," Catherine continued. "With Paulo's international projects, the impact has already reached 3 African countries and 2 in Central America." Paulo, who had returned especially from Senegal for the party, added, "Mr. Harrison, the model you created is being studied by international organizations as a world reference in sustainable rural development." "That's wonderful," Samuel replied. "But what makes me most proud isn't the numbers. It's the individual stories of overcoming adversity." He looked at the crowd before him and continued, "Each one of you is proof that human potential has no limits when it finds opportunity and proper guidance." Tyler, the first graduate, took the floor representing all former students. "Mr. Samuel, when you tell us we are the protagonists of our own stories, you're being modest. You were the catalyst that made all these transformations possible." "That's true," agreed Abigail, also from the first class. "Without your generosity and vision, we would still be dreaming of opportunities that never came." Victor Sterling, now with completely white hair but a serene and happy appearance, stepped forward to speak. "Samuel, you changed my life twice. First by humbling me with your generosity when I deserved only contempt, then by giving me the chance to redeem myself through social work." "Victor, you transformed yourself. I only offered opportunities." "Maybe. But without your opportunities, I would have remained the same prejudiced, shallow man I was before." It was a conversation that summed up Samuel's philosophy. He always credited people with the merit of their own transformations, downplaying his own role. But everyone present knew that without his initiative, vision, and resources, none of it would have happened. Sarah, now regional director of the Bank for Family Agribusiness, also made a point of speaking. "Mr. Samuel, you revolutionized the Brazilian banking system. Today, serving small rural producers is a national strategy for all major banks." "That's good for everyone," Samuel replied. "The more financial institutions serve small producers, the better for family farming." Mrs. Eleanor, 82 years old but still sharp and active, was the last to speak. Samuel, when you were humiliated at my bank, I was ashamed of the institution my family built. But you turned that shame into pride. Today we are a national benchmark for rural banking inclusion. Mrs. Eleanor, you always had your heart in the right place. You just needed a little push to act. When everyone had finished speaking, Samuel asked for the floor. I want to tell you how I feel at this moment. 10 years ago, I was just a wealthy farmer living a comfortable life, but without any greater social purpose. He paused, looking at the attentive faces around him. The humiliation I suffered at that bank woke me up to a reality I had been ignoring. That having financial resources without using them to transform lives is a form of selfishness. Today, looking at all of you, I see that painful experience was actually a gift. It forced me to discover the true meaning of wealth. True wealth isn't what you accumulate for yourself. It's what you turn into opportunities for others. That's why I want to thank even that humiliating experience. Without it, I would never have discovered the joy of seeing human potential come to fruition. The applause was long and emotional. Many people had tears in their eyes, moved by the depth of Samuel's reflections. When the celebration ended, it was already the early hours of the morning. Samuel stayed on the porch with Catherine, Paul, and Jack, talking about the future of the projects. "Dad," said Catherine, "have you thought about putting all your experience into a book?" "What for?" "To guide other people who want to carry out similar projects. Your methodology could be applied in other areas, not just agriculture." It was an interesting idea. Samuel had empirically developed an effective methodology for social inclusion through professional education. "Paul, you have international experience. Do you think it would be worth it?" "Without a doubt," Paul replied. "I constantly receive inquiries from international organizations wanting to understand how to replicate the American model." "Jack, what about you? What's your opinion?" "I think it's essential, Grandpa. We have an obligation to share the knowledge we've accumulated." Samuel decided to accept the suggestion. He would spend the next year systematizing all of his experience into a book that could guide others interested in social transformation projects. The book, From Humiliation to Transformation, A Methodology for Rural Social Inclusion, was released 2 years later and became an international reference. It was translated into 15 languages and is used by development organizations in more than 40 countries. But Samuel insisted that all of the book's proceeds go to the institutes. He didn't want to profit financially from systematizing his social experiences. 15 years after the original incident, Samuel received news that moved him deeply. The UN had chosen his institutes as a worldwide model for combating rural poverty through education. "Mr. Harrison," said the UN representative during a video conference, "your projects were selected from among more than 500 initiatives around the world. We want to expand the model to 50 countries. It was an enormous responsibility, but also a unique opportunity to impact millions of lives on a global scale." "I accept," replied Samuel, "but with one condition, which is, each country must adapt the model to its local reality. We don't want to impose an American formula. We want to offer principles that can be adapted." "Perfect. That flexibility is exactly what impressed us about your model." The UN project began with pilot countries in Africa, Asia, and Central America. Within 5 years, more than 200 similar institutes were operating on every continent. Paulo took on the international coordination of the project, basing himself in Costa Rica for easier access to all regions. Jack became responsible for technical coordination, traveling constantly to guide implementation in new countries. Catherine took over the general direction of the Brazilian institutes, which now operated in every state in the nation. Samuel, at 75, took on the role of senior consultant, focusing on strategic planning and leadership development for the new projects. "Dad," said Catherine during one of the monthly family meetings, "you've created a legacy that will impact future generations." "No, sweetheart, we created it. This was only possible because you all embraced the cause and carried it forward. But the inspiration came from you. The inspiration came from that moment of humiliation at the bank. If it hadn't been for that painful experience, I might never have developed enough empathy to create all of this." It was a reflection Samuel often made, how a moment of pain and shame had become the greatest source of purpose and joy in his life. 20 years after the original incident, Samuel was 80 years old and in enviable health. He remained active in managing the projects, but had already delegated most of the operational responsibilities to his family and team. That year, he received a special honor. The former President of the Republic inaugurated a monument in Kansas City commemorating the 20th anniversary of the Rural Training Institutes. Samuel Harrison, said the former president during the ceremony, turned a personal experience of social injustice into a national movement of inclusion and development. His story proves that determined individuals can transform national realities. The monument was a sculpture depicting a young rural man receiving a diploma, symbolizing transformation through education. But what moved Samuel the most was discovering who had been chosen as the model for the sculpture. Tyler, his first graduated student, who was now president of the National Confederation of Rural Institute Alumni. "Tyler," said Samuel during the ceremony, "seeing you represented on this monument is the greatest honor I could receive." "Mr. Samuel, you should be the one up there representing us. You're the true hero of this story." "No, Tyler, the heroes are all of you, who had the courage to believe in yourselves and transform your lives." After the ceremony, there was an alumni gathering of the institutes. More than 2,000 people attended from all over the United States and several other countries. Samuel moved through the groups, listening to success stories and meeting the children and grandchildren of the first graduating classes. Many of those young people were already following in their parents' footsteps in family farming projects or social responsibility initiatives. "Mr. Samuel," said Carla, the former student who had created the sweets cooperative that now exported to 10 countries, "my 16-year-old daughter wants to study at the institute when she turns 18. How wonderful! And does she have a specific interest in any particular area?" "She wants to work with sustainable agriculture and climate change. She says it's the defining issue of her generation." It was gratifying to see that the new generations were becoming interested not just in rural businesses, but in their environmental and social implications. "And do you support her decision?" "Completely. I want her to have the same opportunity to transform her life that I had." Similar conversations repeated themselves throughout the entire event. The second generation of families benefited by the institutes was reaching the age of professional training, creating a virtuous cycle of renewal and continuity. At the end of the event, Samuel stepped onto the stage for a final speech. "My dear friends, over these 20 years, I have learned that social transformation is not a project with a beginning, middle, and end. It is a continuous process that passes from generation to generation. You, the first graduating classes, didn't just transform your own lives. You created a movement that now inspires your children and grandchildren to keep transforming the world. This gives me the certainty that the work we started goes far beyond our individual lives. It will carry on through you and your descendants. So my feeling today is not one of conclusion, but of renewal. We are handing this legacy to the coming generations with the confidence that they will take it even further." The applause was deafening and went on for several minutes. Many people wept with emotion, moved by the prospect of the work continuing. That night at home, Samuel had dinner with his family at a table that now included spouses and children of the grandchildren. The family had grown, but the spirit of unity and social commitment remained. "Grandpa," said Pearl, his 18-year-old granddaughter who was studying social administration, "can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, my dear." "Have you ever regretted spending so much money on social projects instead of leaving a bigger inheritance for the family?" It was a direct and important question. Samuel thought carefully before answering. "Pearl, I left you the greatest inheritance I could possibly leave, a legacy of purpose and meaning." "What do you mean?" "Money runs out, sweetheart. Buildings collapse, companies go bankrupt, investments lose value. But a legacy of social transformation lasts forever. And is that worth more than financial security? It's worth far more, because it gives life meaning. You wake up every day knowing that you have an important role in the world, that your lives make a difference in the lives of other people." Jack, now married and with a young son, agreed. "Grandpa, I have colleagues who inherited a lot of money from their parents, but they live empty lives without purpose. I prefer our inheritance of values and social responsibility. Exactly, Jack. And besides, Samuel smiled, our businesses have never been as prosperous as they are now. Investing in people has generated more return than any financial investment. And it was true. Samuel's agricultural businesses had grown exponentially, benefiting from the development of the entire regional production chain that his social projects had promoted. "Dad," said Catherine, "what's the next big project?" "I'm thinking about a rural community university." "What do you mean?" "A university that offers free higher education courses in agriculture, veterinary science, rural management, sustainable development, but specifically for young people from humble rural backgrounds. It was an ambitious project, one that would require even larger investments, but Samuel felt it was the natural evolution of the technical institutes. And where would it be? "Right here, on an extension of the ranch. We have enough space." "Dad, that's massive. It'll cost tens of millions. And it'll transform thousands of lives every decade, worth every penny." Paulo, joining the conversation by video call from Costa Rica, was excited about the idea. "Mr. Samuel, a rural community university would be revolutionary. We can replicate the model internationally. Let's start with one here in the United States and see how it works. Can I help with the project? I have experience now with international educational projects." "Of course, Paulo. Your experience will be invaluable." In the following months, the family devoted themselves to planning the rural community university. The project included 5 initial programs: agronomy, veterinary medicine, agribusiness management, sustainable rural development, and cooperative studies. Selection would be based on social criteria. Young people from rural families with low incomes would have priority. There would be quotas for different regions of the country, ensuring geographic and cultural diversity. The faculty would be made up of traditional university professors combined with successful hands-on professionals, maintaining the balance between theory and practice that characterized the technical institutes. "The big innovation," explained Samuel during a planning meeting, "will be the community service system." "What do you mean?" asked the hired educational consultant. "Each student during the program must develop a community project in their home region. And after graduating, they must commit to working at least 3 years on rural development projects before pursuing their own career." "It's a way to ensure the social impact multiplies," observed Catherine. "Exactly. And it also ensures that the knowledge they gain makes its way back to the communities the students came from." The university project took 3 years to be approved by the relevant authorities. During that period, Samuel invested in building the infrastructure: classrooms, laboratories, library, dormitories, dining hall, and agricultural and veterinary practice areas. The total investment reached $40 million, financed entirely from Samuel's own funds and from business partners he managed to bring on board. The Samuel Harrison Agricultural University was inaugurated 25 years after the incident at the bank, in a ceremony that brought together national and international education leaders. "This university," said the Secretary of Education during the ceremony, "represents a new era in American higher education. It combines academic excellence with social commitment in an innovative way." The first incoming class had 200 students selected from more than 5,000 applicants across the country. The profile was exactly what Samuel had envisioned: talented young people from humble rural origins, driven by both personal growth and a commitment to their communities. "Professor Samuel," said Grace, a 19-year-old from rural Kansas, during the inaugural lecture, "this university is the realization of a dream I didn't even know I could have." "What do you mean, Grace?" "Growing up as the daughter of small farmers, I never imagined I could attend a university. What better than a university that would prepare me to work with exactly what my family has always done? And what is your social project?" "I want to create a rural development center in my region. There are many families there who live off subsistence farming, but they could produce much more with proper technical guidance." It was exactly the student profile Samuel had envisioned: people with practical knowledge of their local reality, motivated to transform their communities through technical and scientific knowledge. The university's first years confirmed those expectations. Students stood out both academically and in developing innovative social projects. Brian Edward, a young man from rural Missouri, developed a low-cost irrigation system that reduced water consumption by 60% and was already being adopted by hundreds of small farmers. Sarah, not the bank manager, but a student with the same name, from Oklahoma created a goat-raising method adapted to the semi-arid region that tripled productivity with the same amount of feed. Raphael from Texas developed a youth cooperative program that organized the children of small rural producers into shared management groups, optimizing resources and knowledge. Each project was guided by university professors, but was born from the practical experience and real needs of the students' home communities. "This is exactly what I wanted to see," Samuel commented to Catherine during a visit to the students' projects. Academic knowledge applied to solving real problems of real people. And the best part is that each project will benefit hundreds of families in their home regions. Exactly. Each graduate becomes a radiating center of development in their region. 5 years after the university was founded, the time came for the first commencement. 185 students successfully completed their courses, and all of them already had defined projects for the 3 years of mandatory community service. "This first class," Samuel said in his commencement speech, "will mark a new era in rural development in the United States. You are pioneers of a different way of doing university. You received cutting-edge knowledge, but not to enrich only yourselves. You received it to transform your communities and raise the standard of living for America's rural populations. I am certain that in 10 years, we will see the results of your work spread across the entire country." After the ceremony, Samuel spoke individually with each graduate about their future plans. The prospects were encouraging. Development projects in 250 rural communities across 20 American states. "Professor Samuel," said Tyler, another Tyler, not the first student from the technical institutes, "do you have any idea of the impact this university will generate?" "I have some idea, Tyler, but you are the ones who will bring that impact to life. We are merely the instruments. The vision and the resources came from you." "No, Tyler, you are much more than instruments. You are partners in building a fairer and more developed country." This conversation summed up the philosophy Samuel had developed over decades of social work. He always saw himself as a facilitator, never as the protagonist of the transformations he promoted. At 85 years old, Samuel reflected deeply on his journey during an interview for a documentary commemorating the 30-year anniversary of the social projects. "Mr. Samuel," asked the journalist, "if you could go back in time, would you change anything in your story?" Samuel thought for a long moment before answering, "I wouldn't change anything, not even the humiliation I suffered at the bank." "Why?" "Because it was precisely that painful experience that opened my eyes to the reality of social exclusion. If I hadn't gone through that, I might never have developed the empathy needed to create all these projects." And what was the most rewarding moment of this entire journey? It wasn't a specific moment. It was the gradual process of realizing I was contributing to breaking the cycle of rural poverty, seeing young people without prospects turning into leaders of their communities. That's priceless. And the greatest challenge? Convincing people that they had far more potential than they imagined. Many young people arrived at the institutes thinking they weren't capable of great achievements. The greatest challenge was breaking down that limited self-image. And how did you do that? With real opportunities, quality technical guidance, and above all, believing in them before they believed in themselves. The interview aired on a national television network and sparked an unexpected public response. Thousands of people reached out wanting to contribute financially or as volunteers in the projects. "Dad," said Catherine, "I've never seen so much public interest in our projects." That's because people need inspiration. They see many social problems, but few effective solutions. And now, do we have the structure in place to make the most of all this interest? We will have. It's time to create the foundation we've always planned. The Samuel Harrison Foundation for Rural Development was officially created on the 30th anniversary of the social projects. Its goal was to systematize, expand, and perpetuate all the work developed over the decades. The foundation took over management of all the technical institutes, the Samuel Harrison Agricultural University, and the credit programs. In addition, it began developing new projects based on the demands that emerged from the beneficiary communities themselves. The foundation ensures that this work continues regardless of our physical presence, Samuel explained to the family. It's a way of institutionalizing the legacy, agreed Paulo, who had returned to the United States to take over as president of the foundation. Jack became the academic director, responsible for the entire educational side. Catherine became director of special projects, focusing on innovative initiatives. Samuel became chairman of the advisory board, maintaining active participation in strategic guidance without the operational burden. At the age of 90, Samuel was in excellent physical and mental health. He continued to live on the ranch, but now in a smaller house, better suited to his age. The main house had become a visitor center for the social projects. That year, he received an honor that deeply moved him. The U.S. government created the Samuel Harrison Award for Social Transformation, presented annually to the person or organization that stood out most in rural social inclusion projects. "It's an honor to have my name associated with this cause," he said during the ceremony establishing the award. "But I hope others do far more than I did." The first award was presented to a former student of the institutes who had created a network of women's organic farming cooperatives, benefiting more than 1,000 families in the Northeast. "Professor Samuel," said the award recipient, "this award belongs to you, sir. I only applied what I learned at your institutes." "No, my dear, the award is rightfully yours. You multiplied knowledge and transformed lives. That's exactly what we always dreamed of." Each year, the Samuel Harrison Award revealed new, inspiring initiatives that arose directly or indirectly from the original projects. It was confirmation that the movement had taken on a life of its own and was spreading organically across the country. 35 years after the incident at the bank, Samuel made one last major public appearance. He was invited to speak at the opening of the International Conference on Sustainable Rural Development, which brought together experts from 80 countries. 35 years ago, Samuel began, I was just a wealthy farmer who thought his social contribution was limited to paying taxes and employing a few people. A painful experience with prejudice opened my eyes to a reality I preferred to ignore. That social exclusion is an injustice we all have a responsibility to fight. Over these years, I've learned that social transformation is not a matter of charity or kindness. It's a matter of intelligence and justice. It's intelligent because it invests in human potential, generating sustainable economic development. It's just because it offers opportunities to those born into less privileged circumstances. That's why my advice to all of you is, don't wait for government policies or initiatives from others. Identify people in your communities who have potential but no opportunities, and build bridges between that potential and the possibilities for growth. The return, both personal and social, will be far greater than any traditional financial investment. The speech was met with a standing ovation that lasted more than 5 minutes. Representatives from dozens of countries approached afterward to ask for guidance on how to implement similar projects in their regions. "Mr. Harrison," said the Agriculture Minister of an African country, "would it be possible to adapt your institutes to our reality?" "Of course. The principles are universal: quality education, focus on human potential, commitment to social transformation. It's the methods that must be adapted to each culture. Can we count on your guidance? You can count on the guidance of our foundation's team. They have far more practical experience than I do now." It was a demonstration of the maturity Samuel had achieved, recognizing that the movement had grown beyond him and that the next generations were prepared to carry the work forward. On the flight back to the United States, Samuel reflected on the journey he had taken. From victim of prejudice to global reference in social transformation, the irony of life was not lost on him. "Catherine," he said to his daughter who was accompanying him on the trip, "do you know what makes me most proud in this whole story?" "What, Dad?" knowing that if I die tomorrow, the work will continue. You and the alumni have built such a solid network that it doesn't depend on any single person. Dad, don't talk about... Sweetheart, at 92 years old, it's natural to think about continuity. And I'm at peace because I know the legacy is secure. Samuel lived 8 more years, actively following the expansion of the projects. He saw the foundation grow to 50 technical institutes, 5 rural community universities, and development programs in 12 countries. When he passed away peacefully at home at the age of 100, he was surrounded by his entire family and some of the first alumni of the institutes, who made a point of visiting him regularly. His funeral brought together more than 10,000 people in Kansas City. Alumni came from every state in the country and from several nations, national and international officials, business leaders who had been inspired by his projects, families whose lives had been transformed by the institutes. Samuel Harrison, said the President of the United States in his address, proved that a determined individual can transform national realities. His legacy will inspire future generations of Americans committed to social justice. But the tribute that best captured Samuel's spirit came from Tyler, the first student to graduate from the institutes, now in his 50s, and a national leader of the family farming movement. Professor Samuel taught us that we all have unlimited potential, that the circumstances of birth do not determine the possibilities of the future. That quality education can break any social barrier, but more than that, it taught us that those who receive opportunities have an obligation to offer them to others. That's why his legacy isn't in the buildings or institutions he created. It's in each one of us who was transformed by his opportunities and now transforms the lives of other people. Professor Samuel lives on in every young person who rises from poverty through the institutes, in every family that thrives through the cooperatives, in every community that develops through the social projects. His physical death doesn't end his story. In fact, it marks the beginning of a new phase, where his ideas and values live on through the thousands of people he inspired. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this story of transformation and overcoming. Do you believe Samuel made the right decision when he turned his humiliation into motivation to help others? Share your honest opinions in the comments. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to leave a like, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional narratives like this one. Thank you so much for your company.